the insight is, it is very useful and important to have your protection. What is not useful and helpful is when you do that in relation to yourself.
Yes.
So that you have this process where you can move in and out in a kind of dual process of being restorative and going out into the world and being okay and functioning, because you don't, it's an intimate thing, grieving, very intimate. You need to trust people. It's incredibly emotional. But I think some of the difficulty, because society expects us to forget and move on and get over and go into your next chapter, we internalize that.
Yeah.
And so then we internalize that message in a kind of blank voice objective. My dad died when I was 15, as if you don't feel anything. And what I understood from your book, and I'd be interested in people watching and listening, whether this is their experience too, is the grief just piles up inside you. Because it isn't, grief needs to be voiced. It needs to be, in how we heal in grief is by allowing us to feel the pain of it.
Yeah.
So when you block it by being busy, people often medicate with work or drugs or, you know, whatever it is, then it just stays unchanged in your body. So there came a point that you unconsciously, I think, recognize this really isn't working for me. Do you want to kind of talk about that and GriefCast? And
Yeah, it's interesting when you're saying that as well, because I think it's one of those things that happens very very gradually and subtly, and I didn't really know that I was building that many walls, and I needed them at first, but then like you said, I definitely packed the grief away quite neatly, and I'm someone who deals a lot of control issues and wants to be, so I definitely was like, okay, it's too much, so I'm going to put the grief in a box and just duct tape that box over. And as I say, yeah, in my book, the thing that I really learned in this process of 20 plus years of grieving is that grief just waits. And I found that very scary when I was younger, because I was like, oh my God, it's going to, at any minute, the box will explode. And what I realized was it just waits really patiently. It's not angry at you.
sometimes.
Sometimes. With me, it waited very patiently for me to open the box until it literally was like, you kind of need to open it. And so, yeah, in 2016, well, actually before 2016, I started the podcast. But leading up to that, I'd say probably about 3 or 4 years before that, I kind of, wasn't a breakdown, but it was definitely like the grief became really loud. And I started to have physical symptoms. I went to my GP where I was like, oh, like I can't sleep, or I'm grinding my teeth all the time. And then he was the one who said to me, do you think you're stressed? Well, yeah. But again, it wasn't, I even then I didn't really think it was grief. I just kind of thought, I kind of knew in the back of my mind I haven't really dealt with this. And then eventually I ended up getting therapy on the NHS because I waited like another 3 years after that. So I kind of had realized that it was, yeah, building up inside me in a way that I couldn't ignore anymore. And I think I also got to the point where I thought, well, actually, maybe I am ready to look at it. Maybe I'm, I was in my mid-30s and I thought I probably could handle it now. Whereas again, prior to that, the sentence had because I couldn't have even begun to say, this has just happened to me. Like, I don't have a dad anymore. Like, who am I? What now? Because I think, again, it's not that time heals, but time certainly offers you this place to get to. You can look back and go, oh, right, there's a lot of things here that maybe I haven't dealt with.
And I think where I really kind of chime with you in my experience is that we need our defenses. It isn't about,
Yes.
When someone's first grieving, like them doing everything and sharing everything, and that particularly for a teenager, but at any time of your life, that we have to trust and respect our innate defenses that emerge from how we've learned to manage difficult emotions, and that we respect them. It isn't our internal job with ourselves or others coming up to us to kind of break them down. I think what's important is recognizing as early as you can the signals that now is the time you need to get support. And it sounded like, I mean, because your family, as you talk about in the book, you were a family that talked.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like you know, like some families, you know, the person that died, the parent, was never talked about again, or everything was removed, they were replaced, you know, they lost a parent who died and also the parent who was grieving. You had a kind of supportive, so that probably is in you and enabled you to manage for as long as you did. But also it's a piece of work. And I think part of what you're saying in the book is that, you know, this isn't tidy or messy, you know, that this is a kind of ongoing process that we have to let it do its stuff within us to change us, and to let ourselves know that we need the support that we need at the time and ask for the support. But you've been saying that people really are still, even though you've done your podcast, and that there's been, you know, so much discussion and awareness raising about grief, people still are very ignorant about, you should just get over it. Like, I'll give you 3 months, sometimes 6 months, a year after the first anniversary, you're kind of done.
Yeah. And it's I found that a little bit depressing with launch. So the book came out in January, and obviously I've been doing the grief class since 2016. So I've been speaking to people who get it, people in the club, or I've been interviewing people like you who get it. And I think it gives you a slightly warped view of the world, because you start thinking, you know what? I think we all want to talk about it. We all like, you know, the world's changing. We're all empathetic. And then when I went to do PR in, I guess what I would describe as like the normal world. And I had some, you know, lots of people being very kind and very lovely, but I was amazed at getting the reaction I got when I was, you know, in my 20s again, of having people again be kind of like, so, well, they would start interviews like this, like, I've never lost anyone, so I didn't want to read your book. And I, you know, I've never, I don't really know anyone who's died. And I'd be like, wow, okay, sure.
Lucky you.
Yeah, lucky you. And I said to someone, so I don't think you'd ever approach anyone perhaps with a disability or something that, you know, doesn't match what we would consider an able body, and be like, well, that's never happened to me. Like, you know, my eyes work, by the way. I see you wearing glasses. I don't need them. Like, it's a very, to set your case.
Insensitive, yeah.
I found that like, oh, okay. And then, yeah, I was surprised that people were still sort of saying things like, so, you know, your dad died, you know, over 20 years ago. And, you know, are you surprised you're still talking about it? And I'd be like, well, you obviously haven't read the book, because the book says the sort of the big premise with the book that I want people really to walk away from is, you don't get over it. And I was really surprised that some people, I guess what I would call like muggles, normal people, not in the club, were still harping on with that opinion. And I found that a little bit sad, because I really thought, after doing the grief class for so long and having all these conversations, that maybe, you know, it had radically changed out there. And it made me think, I don't know how much it has changed unless you've experienced it. And that's difficult for us in the club. And I don't necessarily know what we can do to fix it. I think it's more about being prepared that there's just people who don't understand. And my advice now is like, just be choosy who you take your grief to. You know, like, you don't have to take it to everyone. And as you said, it's really intimate, it's really personal. And if you need to use your sentence that day,
Fine. And like, always, by the way, everyone listening, have their sentence in their pocket.
Yeah,
it's
so helpful, because I've definitely been in situations where I thought, you know, people are asking me stuff and I'm like, you're not really listening, you're not really interested really in what happened, you just kind of want to put the narrative on me of why I wrote a book. And a lot of that seems to be people thinking like, oh, I was like a daddy's girl and I haven't really got over it. And I sort of laughingly in all these interviews have been like, if I was a daddy's girl, I probably would be in a better place right now. Like, we had a really complicated relationship. That's why I'm still talking about it. That's why I haven't reached a place of peace with it for so long. So I think, yeah, definitely have your sentence. And I definitely learned to kind of take a breath when someone starts asking me these questions, and be like, how much do you really need to know? And how much are you just needing to like put my, or as we say in the show a lot, grief maths, like how much you wanting to grief maths me of like, well, 20 plus years, I think that's too long, I think you should be over it. And if someone offers me that, I'm like, okay, well, it's not for you. I'm going
Yeah,
to take
yeah.
it to someone who understands. So I do think I did find that a bit weird. I really thought that maybe it had changed, but I realized I'd only be speaking to griefsters, people in the club. So I was like, oh, okay. It's still hard for some people to accept that this idea that you don't get over it, because as I've said on other interviews, that what they're always looking for is for you to
A
be
quick
fine.
fix.
Quick
And you to
fix,
be fine.
you to be fine, and you to match the person that was there before the grief, rather than like this new version of yourself that is broken and has reformed and has learned to love and trust and be vulnerable, but
And have fun
and
and
have
laugh and
fun.
have sex and have
Yeah,
babies and
but there's a lot of pain that you had to walk through, and it is that thing of like, if someone's walked through hot coals, you can't be surprised when like their feet hurt. It's like, yeah,
yeah.
my feet still ache occasionally because I did that. I'm okay. Most days I'm fine, but like, yeah, do my feet still hurt? Yeah. Am I still sad he died? Yeah, I'm still sad. Like, and
And
that
that's
seems to
really
foster.
legitimate. Yeah.